Are we on, Deborah? Okay. I'll call this meeting to order of the Tillamook County Compensation Board at 3 p.m. on January 13th, 2026. First on the agenda is the Compensation Board meeting review. Rachel, hit it.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The purpose of the meeting today is for the Compensation Board to hear recommendations for elected official compensation, deliberate, and provide recommendations to the Board of Commissioners. I understand there are commitments following this meeting, so we're going to try to adjourn promptly at 4 o'clock. I will first present a brief review of the last Compensation Board meeting that was held on April 30th of 2025. I will then review the elected official compensation approach that was approved by the Compensation Board during April. Cameron with Troop is with us today, and she will present Troop's analysis and recommendations. I will then provide some supplemental information, and considering Troop's recommendation, provide a comprehensive recommendation from County Human Resources. You'll then hear any public comment, followed by your deliberation. So just as a way of a recap, since it's been a while since you've convened, on April 30th, staff shared background regarding the historic procedures for determining elected official compensation. Staff also shared clarity and recommendations on how to determine elected official compensation, and that is guided by the statutes, which is attachment 1. Staff shared the county's compensation philosophy that has been adopted by the Board of Commissioners. That's attachment 2 in your packet. The Compensation Board during the meeting approved of the approach to determine elected official compensation. And Cameron is going to go through the compensation philosophy briefly during her presentation, so I'm not going to highlight that. But I did want to review, just to set the tone for the meeting, the statutes that guide the Compensation Board's review and recommendation. So referring to attachment 1, this is what was shared last time, with the exception of a labor attorney's legal opinion that I'll go through. I'm not going to go through all of the text here. I'm just going to highlight the ones that I just want to remind of today. So 204.112 states that the County Compensation Board shall annually recommend a compensation schedule for the county elective officers mentioned in ORS 204.005. Those are the sheriff, county clerk, county assessor, county treasurer, and the commissioners. The justice of the peace and district attorney are not mentioned here, and it is not a requirement of the Compensation Board to provide recommendations for their salaries. After deliberation, the Compensation Board did decide that they wanted to do that, and so that is part of the process, but it is not set forth in statute. 204.112 sub 3 states the County Compensation Board shall annually review the compensation paid to persons comparably employed by the state of Oregon, local public bodies, and private businesses within a labor market deemed appropriate by the board for each elective officer. The County Compensation Board shall take into account such factors as the number of employees supervised and the size of the budget administered by each elective officer, the duties and responsibilities of each elective officer, and the compensation paid to subordinates and other appointed employees who serve in positions of comparable management responsibility. The County Compensation Board shall prepare and approve by majority vote a recommended compensation schedule for the elective officers and shall submit the recommended compensation schedule to the county governing body, which is the Board of Commissioners. Additionally, sub 4 of that statute states, notwithstanding subsections 1 to 3 of this section, which I just read into the record, the sheriff's salary shall be fixed in an amount which is not less than that for any member of the sheriff's department. So one of the things that came up when we were working with Troop is, what is salary defined as? There are many individuals who are subordinates of the sheriff at the sheriff's office who have additional certifications that bump up their total compensation. And so should those be figured in to the salary? And so in consulting with 3 labor attorneys, they agree that, and this is in your packet, regarding interpretation of salary to determine the application of this statute, salary is the base, and because incentives such as longevity and DPSST are based on qualifying conditions, we would think that those can be excluded from salary for the purposes of statute. So when Troop was doing their analysis, the base salary for the subordinates was considered, not all of the additional certifications. Okay. So moving on to the elected official compensation approach, the approach that the compensation board directed county staff to implement was a compensation schedule for the county sheriff, clerk, assessor, treasurer, commissioners, and also the district attorney and justice of the peace. The process must be unbiased, transparent, and centered on the statutes. The compensation study should use the 11 comparator counties adopted in the compensation philosophy. And for the steps that were set forth for the process, the first two are completed. The first being human resources populating what we call the AOC table for each elected official to serve as the job description for the comparator survey, and that staff review each table with the respected elected official for accuracy. So that was completed and done before it was sent. They were sent to Troop. Troop conducts a compensation study consistent with the study for AFSCME, part-time, Teamsters, and non-represented employees. The next steps are for the compensation board to prepare and approve a recommended compensation and submit the recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. First, the Board of Commissioners must receive a recommendation and approval from the Budget Committee, which is, a meeting that we have scheduled later in the month, and I'll go through that when we get to the timeline. And then lastly, the Board of Commissioners will approve the compensation of the elected officials, including their own compensation. So I will stop there with any questions on where we've been, how we got there before we pass it on to Troop.
Wording for the acronym AOC.
Association of Oregon Counties, sorry. Association of Oregon Counties, thank you.
On the question about the labor attorney's opinion regarding the interpretation of salary, was our county council always also asked that
Yes.
question? And they concurred with?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, ready for Troop? Okay, Cameron?
Great, thank you. Can everyone see the slides that I'm showing?
Yes.
Cover sheet. All right, great. So thanks for having me today. I've said it before, it has been an honor partnering with Tillamook County for these projects, and I'm happy to present the findings of the studies today. So I'm the Compensation Services Director at Troop, and I've also been the lead on this project for the class and comp studies for Tillamook County. The presentation I'm going to show you is no new material. It's a highlight reel of the materials you were already sent. No new content, so you can follow along on your versions that you may have in front of you. And we'll cover the classification project, the AFSCME study, non-represented part-time and Teamsters as well. And then we'll go into the detail on the elected official study highlights and recommendations. Starting with the classification study. The classification study was completed in July of 2025, and it included a comprehensive review of all the job classifications across the organization, excluding elected officials, since those roles are governed by the separate statutory and governance process, rather than the county's employee classification system. And so we did that process by collecting information from employees, managers, and HR, and we updated the job documentation accordingly. The outcomes from the study included class description format updates for consistency, class description content changes, such as duties and responsibilities being updated, and recommendations for expanded job families. The outcome of that study was were reviewed by the county for implementation considerations, including bargaining. Next, the AFSCME study was completed. It was completed ahead of the rest of the jobs due to the bargaining cycle. So this report was completed in July of 2025. And overall key findings from this study included findings of employer paid benefits the benefit costs paid by the county for AFSCME employees exceeded the market average by about 8%. And according to the county's compensation philosophy, we looked at total compensation for this group, including salary and employer benefit costs. So when we included both salary and the strong benefits offered by the county, the total compensation for AFSCME lagged the market by 6% overall. And that wasn't equal for all positions. So we made market adjustments per jobs to correct misalignments on a job by job basis rather than market increase for all jobs. You're going to hear me say that a few times because this was the consistent approach taken for each group. And then additionally, we looked at the pay structure for AFSCME and conducted a pay equity study for this group. Following the AFSCME study, we performed the study that included also non-rep, including, that included non-rep, part-time, and Teamsters. And that report was completed in November of 2025. And overall key findings for this study, like AFSCME, the non-rep and Teamsters jobs led the market for benefits by 9% and 2% respectively. And when we looked at the total compensation for this group, so again, including salary and benefit costs, non-rep and part-time were found to be, as a group, aligned with the market, which means within 5%. So their actual percentage was, the non-rep and part-time was within 1% of the market average midpoint, and the Teamsters jobs were just under 5% below the market. So like AFSCME, we didn't apply a blanket increase recommendation to go with the market, but we reviewed and provided recommendations for jobs that were 5% or more below the market for total compensation. And like AFSCME, we reviewed the pay structures for market alignment and performed a pay equity study. So from here on out, we'll focus mostly on the elected officials' results. That's the end of the highlights. The foundation of any compensation study comes down to the compensation philosophy. And so we completed our analysis in line with the statutes that Rachel just read to you all and listed again here. But additionally, we also aligned our approach with the overall compensation philosophy for the county. And I didn't copy and paste that into this report, but it's on pages 5 and 6 of the total compensation study materials. And so we did this to maintain a consistent and transparent compensation approach so that everything that we touched in the study was done consistently. On page 9 of that same report, you can see the table that has the survey comparators and participants. And then the fourth column down, you can see the elected officials. And so we targeted the 11 county comparators consistent with the other studies, 9 of which were able to provide the data used in the study. And this table gives you a big picture view of all the data that we collected for all the studies. And so the state of Oregon and city of Tillamook weren't comparators for either director level or elected official positions because the entity size, but they remained comparators for the lower level jobs, but that wasn't applicable for elected officials. On a side note, we really appreciate all the participants, the counties and other organizations that chose to give their valuable time to participate in the survey. We asked a lot of them. Moving on to results. So consistent with the other groups included in the study, we looked at total compensation to make market comparisons. And the compensation philosophy for the county identifies benefit costs as the ones to use for the analysis. And so we used a consistent approach. And note that there's a difference between benefit costs and benefit values described here and in the report, but I won't dive in if we don't have any questions about it right now for the sake of time, but I'm happy to dive in more if there's questions. County benefits exceeded the market comparators by 9% when we're making. Do we want to pause for questions or wait until the end?
I think you can just keep going.
Oh,
You can just keep going.
Ken had a
Oh,
question.
sorry.
She was asking.
Ken has a question.
That's okay. I can wait till the end.
Perfect. Thanks. All right, so to make the assessment for the total compensation, we made level set comparisons using an average salary of 68,000 for both the market and Tillamook, and adding the cost of employer paid medical premiums, HRA, VBA contributions, employer paid retirement, and the value of paid time off at 5 years. And that's how you see here the market being 9%. But Tillamook County leads the market by 9% when looking at benefits. And because elected officials receive the same benefit packages as the non-represented group and maintain consistency, we applied the same approach as we applied to all the non-represented jobs. Overall, when we look at the market compared to the market, the elected officials were aligned with market, and aligned means within 5%. And so looking at all the jobs, we see an average of the jobs. I'm going to show you in the next slide, the individual data, but on average for total compensation, the elected official jobs were 2% above the market average. For this group and the one studied, even when overall a group was paid above or at market, aligned with market, we still targeted job level adjustments to move jobs to the market when there was misalignment for the individual jobs. And so in attachment 4, I took a cutout from the market data in attachment 4 from your agenda packet for each of the roles. And you can see that for total compensation, this second to last column in what I cut out, the 2 that were 5% or more below market were the sheriff and the district attorney. And so in addition to looking at the market data, we also examine how Tillamook's internal pay alignment compares to typical market practices. In the market, elected officials are generally paid above their highest paid direct reports, with the main exception being the county commissioners, where the pay tends to be closer due to shared government structures and things. But Tillamook County commissioners are well aligned with how other counties approach commissioner pay. For the other elected officials, the market shows that they're paid on average in the market about 20% above their highest paid direct report, though I will share that exact percentages varies widely between position and organization. As a best practice, on page 26 of the report, I share that best practice is that managers generally be paid at least 10% above their direct reports. And so when we look at these findings of internal alignment, the commissioners are paid in line with how the market pays and compared to their subordinates, but the sheriff's pay, even though it is in line with statute of being paid above the undersheriff, it wasn't aligned with the internal structure best practices or the market comparisons in the study, because it was paid within 5% of its highest paid subordinate. So this leads us to our recommendations. So we found the sheriff and the district attorney being the jobs that are paid below the market at total compensation. We recommended an 11% increase for the sheriff and an 8% for the district attorney. And so the sheriff increase is a little bit different than how far behind the market it was, because it's a double hit of things, because we're addressing the market gap and maintaining alignment with the with being paid above the undersheriff. And then finally, these were our recommendations in July of 2025 and are consistent with the recommendations for AFSCME and other groups to recommend an overall COLA of 2.8%. And I understand that the county decided to offer a 3% increase for this, for the, I think, all groups. I can't speak to that. And that concludes the highlights I have, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Ken, you want to go ahead?
Thank you. So I thought I heard you say that salaries were roughly 14% below market, but with benefits, we're only 6% below market. What part of our benefits is so above market that it brings that 14% to 6%?
So which group are you interested in talking about? Because AFSCME, I think they were the farthest behind market in pay, and then total compensation brought them up. Which group are you interested?
AFSCME works well.
Okay.
Let's talk about them.
Yeah. So AFSCME, oh, I don't have their highlights here, except to say, so they were 8% above. And I know that there were similar trends between AFSCME and the non-rep group. And so when we look at the individual factors, it looks like employer paid premiums is one of the strongest drivers there. And then retirements also was stronger than the market. Most of the areas pulled that up overall. And this isn't the AFSCME table, but it was very similar.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions? So I'm looking at, I don't know if I'm jumping ahead here or not.
We're jumping ahead.
Oh, okay. But I won't say. So I guess that's all the question for now.
Okay, so no, yeah, Cameron's going to stick with us through the meeting.
Okay.
So if other questions come up.
All right.
Okay, so before the compensation board deliberates, before the compensation board deliberates, HR wanted to give the board some additional information based on some things that have transpired throughout our bargaining over the last few months, and provide the board with a comprehensive recommendation. The first is, since the troop report came out for elected officials, I've had several correspondences with the assessor, and I've shared that in your packet. Her questions were fielded through troop, and so I wanted you to have that information. That's attachment 5. Regarding the treasurer position, as you know, Sean Blanchard has resigned as treasurer effective January 2nd. Deborah Jacob has been appointed to the treasurer position. She was serving as the director of financial services. So now she's serving as the appointed treasurer. I've briefed you all on the Board of Commissioners' intention to explore restructuring of the treasurer's office to ensure that it aligns with the county's strategic plan. We'll be discussing that a lot more in meetings later this month, including at the budget committee meeting that you'll be at. But what is before you today are two options for the treasurer position, which reflects two different structures. One is, and they both support the treasurer conducting the elected statutory duties. The first option is a full-time salaried treasurer position, which is our current structure. And the second option is a 0.2 FTE position, which equates to about 4 to 8 hours per week. Attachment 6 in your packet is a memorandum prepared by Troop with the recommended compensation for the 0.2 FTE. We already have Troop's recommendation for the salaried full-time position. Today, I request the Compensation Board's approval of both options. So when the Budget Committee and Board of Commissioners are considering the restructuring, they have the Compensation Board's recommendation for both options, and we can proceed accordingly without having to reconvene the Compensation Board. I appreciate the Compensation Board's consideration of this unique request. Another item is out of class pay in the amount of 5% for Commissioner Scar. She served as interim Human Resources Director between September 30th and October 27th, 2024. The county does have a precedent of elected officials serving in interim positions for our directors from time to time. And so she served in this role. And so keeping with past practice, recommending that the Compensation Board approve that additional compensation. And then to the spreadsheet that you wanted to get to, Chair, the 25-27 compensation adjustment summary, attachment 7. So the left table on page 1 is a summary of all of the adjustments that elected officials have received going back through 2001. I'm not going to go through that, but it's a data point that's often asked of staff during the Compensation Board meetings. The table to the right is a summary of the compensation adjustments, the salary adjustments between 2025 and 2027 for all employee groups. I think this is important for you to see because it weighs in to the recommendation that staff is providing to you. What is not on, so these are all the decisions made by the Board of Commissioners except the elected officials, because that needs to come first before the Compensation Board. Human Resources is recommending that elected officials receive the compensation adjustments in green, which would be a 3% COLA effective July 1 of 2025, effective July 1 of 2026, a COLA between 2 and 4% based on CPI. And then the compensation adjustments recommended by Troop for the sheriff and the district attorney. Not proposing a COLA in July 1 of 27 at this time because you need to convene annually, and I expect that the board will convene next spring during the budget committee process or sooner. And so would expect it would be a similar recommendation, but we're not formally asking you to consider that today. Okay, on the back, it's just a summary of the detail of what the compensation would be for each elected official. What is missing in the Troop data is, or the Troop recommendations is, Troop provided a recommendation on the COLA independently, and which was 2.8. And as Cameron shared, we have been implementing, the board has been approving a 3% for the employee groups stated on the table. And then the market adjustments that she was recommending and the numbers you saw in the report don't reflect the adjustment of the COLA. So what I've done is prepare a table that provides the 3% COLA retro to July 1 of 2025. Then the compensation is done. The compensation adjustment effective January 1 of 26 is calculated. So going through the table in green, all of the adjustments July 1 of 2025, all the elected officials receive a COLA. And then January 1 of 2026, there's an adjustment of 8% to the district attorney and 11% to the sheriff. And then the other change to note is the range is renumbering. We're completely overhauling our pay tables through this effort. And in looking at the elected official pay table, with the other pay tables, as compensation increases, so does the number on the pay table. And the elected officials, there was no rhyme or reason to it. It was all over the map. And so we've just renumbered that. That does not indicate that elected officials went up or down in the table. It's just purely a renumbering in ascending order to align with the compensation increases. And then we didn't figure the COLA that we are recommending because it is going to be between 2 and 4%. And I didn't think there was value in calculating those numbers when we don't know what the actual number is. But we are recommending a July 1, 2026 COLA between 2 and 4% CPI based on what is determined and what the other groups that are slated to receive a 2 to 4% CPI are going to receive. And then just for clarity, moving forward, Commissioner Scar's out of class pay into this page as well. So as you're looking at motions, all of the decisions we're looking for from you today, as recommended from HR, are in one location. So everything in green on this page is the suite of what Human Resources is recommending you consider as a full recommendation to then submit to the Board of Commissioners, but first going back before you and the commissioners as the sitting Budget Committee members. Then to summarize the timeline, on January 21st, the Board of, I'll pause there. Did you have any questions on that attachment? Okay. On January 21st, the Board of Commissioners is scheduled to discuss in depth the treasurer position restructuring. And so do tune into that if you're interested, but you will be discussing it during the January 27 Budget Committee meeting. There's a few items on that agenda, one of which is the treasurer position, as well as the compensation board recommendations. So the Budget Committee will be voting on the compensation recommendations for elected officials to be submitted to the Board of Commissioners. And then tentatively on February 4th, the Board of Commissioners would consider the elected official pay tables. I'm anticipating all the other pay tables would be adopted by that point. And then at the earliest, February 15th, 3% COLA, which is effective July 1, 2025, would be distributed if approved. And then hoping in February, later in February, if not the 15th, the compensation adjustments that are effective January 1, 26 are distributed. And with that, I will take any questions before we move on to public comments.
So I'm looking at the compensation adjustment salary. And in 2022, there's a 7.7% market adjustment for the sheriff. And we're looking at another one here. Are we playing a constant catch up with the sheriff's salary? Or is this something that's going to resolve itself, or is this going to be a perpetual problem?
I'll let Cameron answer that. I think our goal is we are caught up now, but we want to be doing market studies as appropriate, which will be working into our schedule. I don't know if that's every 2 years, every 3 years, we'll be looking at that. But I believe we are caught up with this 11%. But Cameron, could you speak to that?
Yeah, we are caught up according to the market data that we collected and the total compensation. And so I don't expect that we're going to be chasing something down as things go on, but I can't predict what's going to happen. And so that's why doing market studies every couple of years is best practice. But I don't have any indication to say that we're still behind.
And is it the plan to do one of these every couple of years?
Yes.
Okay. Ken, anything?
Nothing from me.
He said nothing from him.
Okay. All right. Okay, so now we've come to the moment of public comment. Is there anyone that wishes to make a public comment? Oh boy, here we go.
Lots unpacked here. I did not know we had a hard stop at 4, so I will try to actually be quick. I can tell you that I'm not the only person that wants to talk. So what I can also say, or what I do want to say, is that I can only speak to my position. I don't know the ins and outs of Christie's or Cassandra's, Ryan's position, that type of thing. So I can only speak to my position. The other thing I kind of want to preface this with is that I understand that there's always a stigma that goes with elected officials kind of advocating or fighting for more money. The public generally doesn't like that. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to just try to stick with factual information and try to avoid advocating for myself or throwing in a bunch of opinion. But what I can say, and since it was brought up and kind of discussed a little bit, is, well, number one, the 7.7 that you referenced. The position of sheriff was actually 12.7% behind that year, and they went with the 7.7% increase because it brings that position within 5%, which follows the philosophy. Now, that 12.7% that the position was behind was the salary. It did not include the total benefit package. And so if you compare it, apples for apples, salary only, that position or the position of sheriff is now 16.9% behind. So I would say that it is actually not caught up. I would say that it's actually perpetual. It continues to grow. When you compare apples to apples, 12.7 being salary only, 16.9 being salary only. Along those lines, I don't understand where the 9% above market for the benefits, and maybe Cameron, right? Maybe Cameron can explain this. Elected officials don't get paid time off. We just get our salary. We do get retirement. We get medical, things of that nature. But in the document, it said that the benefits were figured as a cost. How much money is the county actually paying? Well, 9% of the salary that the sheriff position receives is a big chunk of money. And to say that that big chunk of money is 9% more than the comparator counties, I find that a little bit of a stretch as to how that actually equals 9% above the market comparators. So maybe there can be some better clarification on you know, the $2,000 or $2,400 or whatever it is that they pay for medical and the what they pay for retirement and the Viva account, how that equals 9% above market by comparison of my salary or another elected official's salary. The numbers just don't add up. So some clarification on that would be great. So that's the history of the 7.7%. Like I said, I disagree with the information that's coming through. I believe this is perpetual because it does continue to grow when you compare apples to apples. Another thing that was brought up was the compensation law. There's a couple of things to that. Number one, the statute does actually say that the compensation board is supposed to meet annually and submit a salary recommendation. That did not happen in 2025, which technically would be a violation of statute. Now, I bring this up not necessarily to point blame, but I bring it up because it's important that this information is out there because we can't let this happen again. Every year, the compensation board is supposed to meet and make a salary recommendation. It didn't happen in 25. The legal interpretation from 3 different attorneys on the meaning of the sheriff's comp or the sheriff's salary, that of anybody else in the office. I just want to bring this up. And again, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I'm going to try to avoid my opinion. And I'm going to actually let you know what an attorney that I spoke to, how they interpreted that law. They interpreted it as at no point does it say base salary for anybody else in the office, nor does it say base salary for the sheriff. It just says salary, doesn't say base. But if you look at the definition of salary, salary is the non-variable amount that it is given to an employee every single month. The incentives that the undersheriff or any of the non-represented positions in the office, lieutenants, things of that nature, when you have a certification or a longevity incentive, those are non-variable. That amount is given to them every single month consistently. And the only way that they would be variable is if you lose certification or you quit and lose your longevity. So basically you have to leave to lose those 2 things. So they are not variable, which falls within the definition of salary. Therefore, in my opinion, and the attorney I spoke to, those incentives, those extra pays do need to be included in the salary comparison. Now, I realize that the county and what's being proposed, it's not included, but as I move forward and I tell you some of the information and try to clarify, my whole train of thought is what that attorney told me, is that it is a factor and it does need to be included. What it boils down to is you have 2 different attorneys giving 2 different opinions. And the reality is the only way that you would have a final determination is if you put it in front of a judge. The judge would have to be the one to say this is the actual interpretation. I highly doubt that the creators of this law wanted to leave a loophole open and allow for these incentive pays to come in and have that, there's a reason why that law was put into place. So that being said, in April of last year, the undersheriff got a step increase, and that step increase put that position higher than the sheriff's position. So that position has been making more than me since April of last year. I noticed that the 11% increase recommendation does not include retro. So that means there's a April till now. Actually, April till February, it sounds like we have to wait even longer, which is a little bit frustrating that we're pushing it, this much time. But there's no retro included in that. So that would mean that window of time from April till now, the undersheriff did in fact make more than the sheriff position. And which again, I don't agree with. But the reason that the undersheriff is making more than that is because the particular step that position is at right now gives a base salary or gives that salary. And then there's the incentive pay of certification, which in this case would be advanced certification. So an additional 7%, I believe. And then the board recently authorized longevity pay, which for this, the undersheriff in there now, it would be an additional 6% because he's been there longer than 20 years.
Is that the step increase you're talking about?
Those last two?
Yeah.
No, those are the incentives.
Okay.
So the step increase somewhere, whatever step that the undersheriff is on, in addition to that.
So the longevity isn't the step increase.
Longevity is not a step increase. No, that is a regular pay. Once it actually gets implemented, which I understand it's just a matter of some processes that needs to happen. But he is receiving the certification pay right now. So that is added on to every paycheck every single month consistently. It is part of that position's salary. The parole and probation lieutenant, once the longevity goes into effect, that position will make more than me as well. Will make more than the sheriff position. So that would be two positions in the sheriff's office that would make more. And they are because of those incentives, the longevity and the certification. Now, the difference being is like an assignment, like we have search and rescue lead coordinator or detective or overtime or those type of things. Those incentives are variable because they can vary based on your assignment on a day-to-day basis. The certification or longevity are not variable. There is a difference between those incentives. If the 11% recommended amount is what is given to the sheriff in April, when the undersheriff gets his step increase, that position will be higher than the sheriff again. And again, I'm doing all of this based on the interpretation of the attorney that I spoke to, that those incentives do and are supposed to be included in that salary. It's also worth noting that every single person in the sheriff's office receives the certification or longevity pay. The sheriff is the only position in that office that does not receive it. So God forbid, I drop dead tomorrow, the sheriff would take a pay deduction. He would actually be making less if he was to step in as sheriff, which, hard to actually get somebody to come through there. So anyway, so that talks about a lot of that, the history behind that. So like I said, the 11%, if that's what's given to me, it would put me ahead even with the longevity. But in April, when the step increase comes through, the undersheriff will again make more than me. So do you have a question?
I do. So am I hearing that the sheriff position doesn't have any longevity? Like if you've been there 20 years, you're not getting any longevity pay at any point? Is that what you're saying?
Correct. I have been there 20 years, actually October of last year, and I have my advanced certification and I get no pay for either of those.
Would you get
one in the office?
Would you get longevity pay if you were in another position?
Every position in the office gets longevity. Well, now that it's been passed by the board.
Okay.
The support staff does not have certification, so they would not be
Right.
eligible for certification,
Right.
but all of our deputies, our sergeants, our undersheriffs, lieutenants, all that are certified get the certification pay, but everybody in the office gets longevity. I think the only other thing, and again, it just kind of goes back to the compensation study. Again, I'm really confused. And again, Cameron, maybe if you guys need further explanation, like I said, the benefits and the way those are calculated, the 9% cash value, that makes no sense to me. The other thing is that they're saying I'm 16.9% behind, but then you take the 9% benefits into consideration and it's 7.9% behind. So how did we come up with 11% as the recommended salary? So it's like, I don't understand the train of thought behind that. My guess is that the 11% was meant to get me above the undersheriff, which if they're meant to get me under the, above the undersheriff, that means they're giving some credence to the fact that I should be making more than the undersheriff. And that's with longevity or that's with those benefits. So again, and maybe if need be, if you guys need it, maybe Cameron can explain where the 11% came from when you got 16.9 and 7.9. That's not 5% within of anything. So I don't understand where that number came from. But again, I don't understand where the benefits came from either. So that's really all I wanted to mention. I just kind of wanted to give you the history, why the undersheriff position is more, what this position gets and doesn't get, et cetera. And the fact that, it's been April that the undersheriff's been making more. So any questions for me? And then I'll hand it over to my other fellow electeds.
Yeah, I have a question. Sheriff, I don't know if it's for you exactly. Well, this part of it is, I understand that elected officials don't receive PTO, but are there other benefits? You talked about certifications and longevity pay that the sheriff doesn't receive. Are there other benefits that any elected official doesn't receive that others do other than PTO?
As a standard, I don't know if I can think of any. Like I said, we don't get paid time off. The other electeds are shaking up.
We don't get comped for our certifications.
Okay, so yeah, this sounds like they have some certification issues as well. But off the top of my head, no. I mean, the Teamsters and sergeants unions get some incentives like, depending on if they're a work assignment or, field training officer, things like that. But, those I don't know that those should be eligible to the sheriff because those are variable.
Other question I had that I don't know, Sheriff, if this is for you, but if you can't answer it, good for you. What's the reasoning behind not paying the sheriff or any elected official for certifications and longevity pay?
And that I don't know the answer to. I don't know if there's somebody here that could speak to the history of that. I know that the certification pay actually came about just for the sergeants, undersheriff, and lieutenant and stuff. That came about 4 to 5 years ago, and the longevity just came into play. I don't know, it was a board meeting a couple of weeks ago, something like that. They voted it in. So those positions only recently had those added. And as far as why the sheriff position doesn't get it, I unfortunately don't know the answer.
So I'm sorry, when did those come into play, you think?
I believe, and somebody, Mary Jo might be able to help, or treasurer's office. Deborah's here. I want to say right about the time I became sheriff, it had been getting worked on prior to me. So it was maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago for the certification for sergeants and lieutenants.
In the last bargaining go around after that, so would that have been 3 years ago?
Well, I bargained the first year I was sheriff, so that was.
You mean the certification for sergeant, lieutenants, and undersheriff?
Right after that, Sean worked on it.
I thought it was about 4 years ago.
So certification, maybe about 4 years ago, longevity, within the last couple of weeks.
Sheriff Brown, might you know, and you may not, what about sheriffs in other counties? Do they get longevity?
So it's a mixed bag, and I cannot tell you exactly who doesn't and who does. I know, for example, the Hood River County Sheriff receives certification pay, but he does not receive longevity pay. But they factor that in because his undersheriff gets longevity. But that sheriff told me outright that their board make sure that pay is above there, meaning they consider it. But he only gets certification pay. I know there's other sheriffs that get kind of a mixed bag of it, but without actually polling them or reaching out to them, I wouldn't know for sure. But I do know that it varies. Some do, some don't. Nothing else for me? All right.
Next.
I really wanted to get up here and speak eloquently off the cuff, but I'm not sure I can do that. I did want to say that I feel this is very rushed right now. And I know we set a 4 o'clock stop time, but if we could get more time or, I feel like maybe the board could consider another meeting or something so everybody could have the chance to speak. But I'm going to go ahead and say what I have to say. Do we have to stop at 4?
I was, so it's 10 till 4 now.
Yeah.
And there's several other people that wanted to talk. Is there, I know it's a hard stop today at 4, but could we set up something else or?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't have a hard stop. I heard from others that there may be maybe a hard stop, but I don't want to speak for them. So I can be here. But you can,
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Okay,
have a car that's not running.
So there's a lot of questions and I think there's a lot more going on. I'm not sure we can get through this today, but.
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I'll try and skim the letter and then you can read it later. So, as you know, my name is Cassandra Larson. I serve as the elected assessor and appointed tax collector for Tillamook County. After 23 years of service, I value this role deeply and approach its responsibilities with pride, respect, and a strong commitment to public service. The statute requires the Compensation Board to evaluate elected officials' pay using objective, measurable factors such as number of employees supervised, budget size, duties, and responsibility, and comparisons to similarly responsible appointed positions. This should be a transparent, verifiable process that can be clearly understood and constantly applied by future committees. While I was provided with survey responses from comparable counties, I was not provided with the underlying data analysis or application of statutory factors used to reach the consultant's conclusions. Without access to complete data set and evaluative framework, neither elected officials nor the public can meaningfully assess whether the recommendations comply with statutory requirements. We as electeds are accountable to the public. How are we supposed to explain how these decisions are made for compensation if we can't point to any sort of data analysis? My review of limited materials provided identified discrepancies that could affect the reliability of the study. As you can see, the initial study said that 5 assessors were also tax collectors, and they weren't. They were only assessors. I asked for a review. Upon that review, I was told that it didn't matter. And in fact, if I was compared to only assessors, my salary would be slightly higher. So saying that you're going to take away tax, I could take away tax collection responsibility and make more as just the assessor. That to me says that there are some discrepancies in the study. The study also incorrectly identified my highest paid subordinate by referencing the chief appraiser at step 1 of the pay scale, rather than the actual highest paid employee at property appraiser 3. While I understand this has been since corrected, I have not been provided with updated results reflecting the change. Also, if this study had been done in 2024, my chief appraiser was retiring and there were only 4% under the assessor and tax collector. So that methodology will always put you into compression, and it will always subject your salary to your highest paid subordinate's longevity, not your longevity. And as you know, I have 23 years. So let's see. In the comparator survey response, the Lincoln County assessor is on a salary schedule, yet the study used step 1 of $101,000 rather than the current salary of $107,000. Polk County's assessor salary was listed as $98,000, although the current salary is $106,000. Among the 8 counties that responded to the survey, the Tillamook County assessor and tax collector ranks second highest in both staffing and responsibility, while also carrying the additional statutory duty of tax collection. Despite this, the current salary falls within the lower range of the comparator group and ranks 4th lowest among assessors only, earning $100,000, rather than being grouped with the top earners who average approximately $122,000. This creates a clear misalignment between responsibility and compensation. Internal comparisons, also required by statute, raise similar concerns. The assessor and tax collector supervises a larger and more diverse staff and budget than other director positions, yet is compensated at a lower level. This leads me to believe internal comparisons of management responsibility was not analyzed. I respectfully request the committee ensure elected officials' compensation studies are fully shared, publicly available, and presented in a clear and understandable manner consistent with ORS 204-112. I also ask that the committee reconsider the consultant's conclusions regarding this position, taking into account the attached materials that clearly document its management responsibilities and comparative standing among Oregon counties and within the organization in terms of salary, FTE oversight, and budget size. Whew, thank you for letting me get through that. Okay, so I have included my organization chart, and as you can see, there's I have 17 FTE, 4 very different responsibilities that I oversee. I'm not overseeing 17 appraisers, okay? I'm overseeing 2 different managers, 8 appraisers with all different types of specialized valuation, assessment map and maintenance for GIS cartography, 2 assessment technicians for ownership records and customer service, and 2 accounting technicians for tax collection. The next I'm submitting is just for you to see for all the 36 counties, which ones are assessors and tax collectors and their property tax accounts they're responsible for. And then I showed, I displayed charts that showed with the salaries that were collected from the AOC survey that the assessor, where the assessor falls in salary and sorted by salary and then size of budget and then FTE. I'd also like to say that I was sitting here listening to a recommendation for the treasurer getting a stipend for being, or for the finance director getting a stipend for being appointed treasurer. Correct?
You heard of 2 scenarios. We are currently in a situation that I don't think is where we want to be. So we didn't get into the weeds about what the recommendation is for what the structure should be. But technically, yes, we are in a situation depending on when there is a final solution where an individual, actually, she's not getting a stipend right now. She is the treasurer.
Okay.
So that should not be our structure. Yeah.
Regardless, it was an additional compensation for another statutory duty, as well as Commissioner Scar receiving compensation for an additional duty. Meanwhile, the tax collector has been appointed an additional duty and there's no compensation, in my opinion. Any questions?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. And should I email this to Ken?
You should.
I would assume. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I appreciate your input. I just have to say that as a volunteer, it would have been helpful to have this before the meeting because it's the good detail that we need. But I think you raised some good points and I appreciate you taking the time to let us know.
Ken, do you have any questions?
No, I would just ask that, Cassandra, if you could forward that to me, I would appreciate it. Or if someone could.
Next.
Christy Dunseth, County Clerk. I will let you read. I think a couple things that were glaring for me is that when we look at our comparator counties, if you go to those comparator county websites and you look at the wage for the county clerk, for example, they don't align, like they're way off. So for example, Lincoln County is listed at $92,479, and actually it's 96,381 to 111,854. So, and that's consistent, like with Crook County. Hood River doesn't have a salary listed, but it's out there. And those salaries then, if you add those in, make me lower and below market. And I think with the absence of those true data points, it does call into question the validity of the study. And then my other point, I will echo what my colleagues have already said, return in terms of like the statutory part. But I think when we look across internal equity, my current compensation is lower than that of other department heads who are not elected officials and who carry fewer statutory obligations, narrower scopes of responsibility, and less direct legal and ethical accountability. When responsibility, risk, and statutory mandates are fully considered, my compensation does not align with comparable leadership roles within the county. And I could leave it at that. You can read and I'll email to Ken, but I think we're missing a lot. So, and I've been at the county for 18 years. Again, I don't have longevity. I'm a certified county clerk, which there are just about 16 of in the county out of 36 counties. So I hold a certification through my organization, which is the Oregon Association of County Clerks. And so there is no compensation for that either. And I think the thing that I would have appreciated is the ability to sit down and talk with Troop and have a conversation about what I do as the clerk. We never were given that opportunity. And so a lot of county clerks have elections directors and recording directors, but I am both of those for this office. And that's not taken into account either. So I think there's a lot of things missing. I don't know if you have any questions. But...
Not at this time. Please also make sure this gets to Ken.
Yeah.
So it's 4 o'clock. So procedurally, Rachel, we still have people that want to talk and we have a hard stop here. What's the, if we want to call it a deadline for this decision?
I would say there's no deadline. It's when the decisions are made. So the compensation board needs to meet, and then the budget committee needs to meet, then the board of commissioners need to meet, then the pay tables need to be adopted, then payroll needs to be able to implement it. So those are the steps. And I would say the timelines are when those pieces are ready, which is why all of this is taking so long. So as a practical matter, we have a budget committee scheduled for January 26th at 12:30. We can, if you can tell me you're available right now, I can.
The 26th or 27th?
I'm sorry, 27th. Thank you. We can schedule that now, or we can talk offline about rescheduling this meeting.
Let's talk offline about it.
Okay. So I will look at that as an option to butt up against the budget committee meeting, not to be able to necessarily roll that recommendation in, which we may be able to do, but just for the sake of continuing to move things along, since you will already be here.
And if any of the members here had questions about some of the methodologies or just clarification questions from you or Troop, should we submit those to you ahead of time, or what would be the best way to do that?
That's up to your discretion. I've been fielding questions as they've come to me. I've only connected with the assessor and I've addressed those questions. And I haven't received any questions from anybody else, but I can field questions or take any other direction from the comp board.
Yeah, Ken might have some questions. I hope everyone understands, that, we're members of the public, and we're getting a lot of new information today even. And I think it's just as a general statement, it's fair to say most people feel like they should get more money for their work, myself included. And there are, of course, always budget considerations, but there's also fairness considerations. And so I would like to table this meeting and set something else up, and we can talk offline about that. And then maybe, Ken, if you have questions, or MJ and we can submit those and get some clarification on some stuff before that meeting. And then the rest of the people had comments, maybe we can arrange to have some additional public comment.
So other than getting this meeting rescheduled, is there any action items you need me to do or staff to do outside of what may be forthcoming in other requests?
I can't think of anything specific.
Okay. Okay. And any questions for Cameron that she may be able to answer quickly while she's online?
I guess, I mean, one of the direct questions I heard from the sheriff was about the 9.9%, if maybe some clarification on that part.
I think that I read, memories are not always perfect, that I don't know how you say it, troop people access their data on websites. Are they able to speak if they're still online? Did they actually talk to people in these offices, or did they do like I did? I went out and looked at their salaries all over the state because there's a list that you can. Do we have that information?
She can answer.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so each county completed that AOC, the Association of Oregon Counties form. For that, there may be one or two that we had to look up, but I'm almost positive that it was the counties that completed each of those, but I'll look deeper at my notes for a certain answer there.
They completed a survey,
Okay.
which was that AOC table, the Association of Oregon Counties table.
All right. Thank you.
And
That
is it-
served as the job description in lieu of a job description, and that was reviewed by the elected officials, or requested to be reviewed by the elected officials before it was sent out.
And Cameron, is it a common practice when you do a salary study not to talk to the elected officials?
I don't generally talk to the individuals whose jobs we're reviewing.
Okay.
We generally focus on job documentation.
Okay. Anything else today?
The only other comment I wanted to make is I just really appreciate that the county is, the way I understood it is at some point in the past, a study was underway and it ended up in limbo and you guys picked it up. And I appreciate that because it does demonstrate that the county is committed to equity and parity. And I believe that's important. So I appreciate the county's effort in that.
Okay. Ken, you have any parting thoughts there?
Well, I always have a lot of parting thoughts, Michael, but one thing that kind of stuck out, and Rachel, I will email, I'll email you additional questions, but there were several recitations of comparator county salaries not matching the salaries being quoted. And so an understanding of where that discrepancy is happening, where it's coming from, and who or what data is the board supposed to look at. So I know there's not an answer to that right now, but I think that's something we have to get to the bottom of.
Cameron might be able to answer that quickly right now. I think we do have an answer on that, but we can.
My first sense is that we're looking at different effective dates and that after salaries were adjusted in July, that that's what people may be seeing online right now.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay, so I guess as of 4:07 PM, we'll conclude this meeting for today.
Okay, thank you.